So I was looking in my notes. I don't even remember which notes. Like texts I sent to myself, I guess. And the phrase object permanence was in there. And I don't know why. Because I really don't think it had anything to do with what I'm going to talk about today. I just had that phrase in there, and then I was like, what is object permanence? Like, this is a phrase that I'm aware of, but I don't remember what it is. And then, yeah, I decided to look that up. And then I was like, wait a second, this is like this very, again, specific developmental phase in children. And I was like, okay, I know why I know the phrase now, besides it just being more of like a cultural touchstone, I guess. I mean, I've had to read books on childhood development in my education classes for teaching. So I was like, okay, yeah, I get it. Like, it's a very simple concept of like when a infant finally realizes that that thing will still be there, even though they can't see it necessarily. So it's like a game of peekaboo, or like there's like a stuffed animal on a table and you put like a sheet over it. They're like, whoa, it's gone. And then it's like, oh no, it's back now. And like, yeah, so just the idea that you could hold the concept of the image there, that you can be like, oh yeah, that thing, that object is still there. It's not just gone because I can't see it. Okay, I get it. Like, then I started thinking about like, why did I have that in my notes? I still don't know. But I thought, how can I make a conversation about this? Like, what is, like, I don't even know if it was in my notes because I wanted to have a conversation about it. It was just there by itself, no other context, which is dumb, and I need to have more context when I write these quick little texts to myself that are keywords to influence or inspire something. Something to write about, something to paint, something to talk about. And I was thinking about object permanence, and I was also thinking about legacy. And I was thinking about how there can be a permanence not in a physical object, but in a presence, I guess, like a presence permanence. And how it really be that permanent, and for how long, and the fact that I guess it doesn't really exist is what the conclusion I'm coming to right now while thinking about it. It doesn't really exist because I guess non-object permanence, let's just call it that, non-object permanence, I guess would imply that the non-object doesn't change. Because I think part of object permanence, to me, is that the object that we can't see, that we know is still there because we haven't seen any other outside factors or elements remove the object or change the object, we assume that the object is still the same, that nothing has altered it. Therefore, with non-object permanence, I would, again, kind of label that as legacy of one kind or another. So something living on past its life. Therefore, it would be basically memory. Or, again, through memory or through media of different nature that individuals will engage with to enliven that spirit of whatever that is again. So if I want to talk about non-object permanence with humans, I mean, you could argue that we're objects, but I mean, we want to talk about non-object permanence in humans. I'm not going to go down the route of like ghosts and like spirits and that kind of thing as being separate from the human body. But I think that, again, when it comes to legacy, and now I'm just thinking about what I'm terming non-object permanence is this thing that, because I'm so scared of mortality and so anxious and afraid of it, that I don't really find comfort. I don't really find comfort in leaving a legacy, a non-object permanence, because one, I can't guarantee that, and two, that doesn't do anything for my consciousness and my being that I enjoy living in right now. I would cease to be an object, and and it's a very little comfort to me, if any at all, that my non-object permanence would exist after I'm gone, in the form of things like vlogs, or my paintings, or my writings, or music that I've made, or whatever. I keep saying that it's not of comfort, because when I'm consciously thinking about it, it is not of comfort, really, because I'm like, I'm thinking about this in the context of I'm going to die, and that's really scary, and I don't want to die, and let's just forget about that so we can keep enjoying our day on some level, because let's just not think about death. However, I do a lot of things. I mean, part of them have nothing to do with the anxiety of mortality, but a lot of them do have to do with the anxiety of mortality, the way that I express myself and how I want to pass those expressions down. And the thing is, when I talked about object permanence being something that you would realize that the object is unchanging, like it is still the same way it was a second ago before you put the sheet over it or something, that non-object permanence, you can't guarantee that at all. It's not the same thing. That legacy alters and changes and is fluid based on whoever is experiencing it at the time. So let's say I wrote a book. I mean, we've got words written from people that lived hundreds and hundreds of years ago, right? Real people that left their legacy through their written word. Now, part of things get changed because translations, that could happen while you're living though, so that's not a good example. But the context of the world too, I mean, the context and the history and everything else of the individual who is reading that work, and by reading it, you could say that person is alive in that moment, or the spirit of that person, right? Like the non-object permanence, the fact that that person is being read, their words are being read. But again, interpretations and everything, it's a really difficult thing to kind of work around verbally and just explain with language that it is therefore something that does change. Like the words themselves, if they're never translated or edited any more than when they were they wrote it, and let's say it doesn't get touched after that, or their initial editor, or they approved the edits and they were still living. And let's say it never gets touched after that again, and that's not the reason it changes. It's still the fact, well, even when they're alive, someone can misinterpret the words, right? Even if they're not misinterpreted, it filters through your being, and it's different than how the person wrote it. Like, it kind of goes back to the conversation about terminal uniqueness. It's like every person reading those words, interpreting those words, understanding them, the understanding is going to be slightly different. Unbeknownst to the author, even if they were alive, unless you were to speak to them. But I thought I had a point, and I don't know how to get to it now, about non-object permanence not being permanent. Or not being, let me think of that again. That's the other thing. That's what I was getting at. Yeah, it's not permanent. There's no guarantee that it'll be permanent, and that over time things will change with the spirit of whatever was left from that person. Because one thing is that you would think that over time society's values and whatever else will shift to the point where a text by someone written 100 years ago won't be important in 1,000 years from now. I mean, there's a lot of argument that can happen there, but I mean, you'd think that things will change eventually to the point where it's like that doesn't have the same importance or weight or anything given to it. And the context around it, perception is reality, right? So even though the words will never change, the presentation of the material will change the different possible outcomes that an individual could engage with it. Again, even though the presentation will be the same to 100 people, those 100 people will engage with it differently, but then it'll be even more different based on how it's presented and the context and the time and everything else. But also, what if you are not one of those people that let's say a Shakespeare. I mean, we could argue if Shakespeare was one person or a collective. But let's just say it was one person, and we're still reading Shakespeare to this day. Let's say you're not up there with Shakespeare and famous philosophers and whatever else, but you do, especially now, have the capability to leave all this media behind, right? And beforehand, it was just like friends and family and things like that, and there were there wasn't as much opportunity to leave media behind. I mean, we could still write just as much as we could 100 years ago on pencil and paper, but those physical items will get lost a lot easier than if they're digital. We have no idea what the future holds. I mean, internet, digital, we can get hit by the biggest EMP in the world from aliens, and then all that could be wiped out. Who knows? So the thing is, too, that if you're not at that level where everyone's passing you down, and let's just say it's close family and friends, that will dwindle over time, most likely. Because someone in that chain of humans, some generation isn't going to value your non-object permanence. They're not going to value your contribution to the world in any type of media, and it won't get passed down in the same way. It won't be found in the same way. Maybe it'll be destroyed or left behind or whatever, and get just lost in the ether. Like, or I mean, even if it's on the internet, like someone might stumble upon it. Maybe no one will ever look at it again. But if it's physical items like physical journals or things like that, then the memory fades. Even though the memory, it could be really strong in an individual. Once that person dies, did that get passed on to somebody else? If it did, it won't be passed on in the same way, and it continues to alter. It's like a game of telephone, right? It's like, telling a story or a fable or a legend in a certain way, that things will change over time with that. And like I said, when I consciously think about it, it doesn't provide me any comfort, not because everything might change and my words get altered and who knows, whatever, not because of that, but it doesn't provide me any comfort because what I'm scared of is the physical death, right? But there is a part in me that I know must be somewhat comforted, and my existential dread is put to the side a little bit when I do certain things and work on certain things and express certain things and have something to leave behind. Because that's all that I have control of. That's all that I can do, is have this non-object permanence, I guess, that I'm, or even object permanence in a completely different context than we started out in, right? Like we started over here, and I know we're going all the way over here, even with using the same language, but again, changing context and ideas, that like if I leave a physical book behind, right, I don't have control over that physical book anymore. I don't know if there's going to be copies or if there's millions of copies. They could get banned. Who knows what'll happen to that stuff? I have no control over it anymore. So I don't remember where I was going with that, but I shouldn't say often. I have thought before of paintings of mine. What are the fate of these paintings? Because sometimes they're gifts, people enjoy them in their home, whatever, and what happens when that person dies? Or what happens when that person moves? Or what happens, you know what I mean? Like, someone else may not see the same value in it, or they're not going to ever see the exact same value in it. I mean, maybe it's more or less value, or just different value, and that piece ends up somewhere, it's trash. Maybe it ends up at Value Village, and then someone buys it just to paint over it. I don't know. It's one of those things that I don't really dwell on too long, because like, what am I going to do with non-information? I have no idea what will happen to that stuff. So it just kind of leaves my mind pretty quickly, thankfully. I've talked about before, or maybe haven't talked about it, but I've thought about it a lot, that having the ability to forget, or it's the same thing as ignorance is bliss, and I wish that I didn't have all these thoughts and ideas and like making connections between everything, because it doesn't give me a lot of peace. So every once in a while, in a circumstance like that, I'm very thankful that I can just not think about that thing anymore. Usually, I need a resolution in order to not think about something anymore. And there are things that will just never be resolved because we'll never know. Or even, I can drop completely and it's not even about faith. It's not about like a scientific knowledge or faith. It's about like, I have no idea what's going to happen with these paintings and therefore I'm able to let it go. That doesn't happen all the time because when there are answers available, I feel like I go there. And now I'm really going off the rails. So, to wrap things up, I feel like I should have written about this before I talked about it. So maybe there'll be a part 2 because I really do want to write about it in some degree and further understand it. Because writing about it, as I've talked about before, is still a form of external processing, just like speaking to the camera is. And I learn something by doing that, and I figure things out by doing that. But it is a much slower process. So I learn different things, or different things come out in a different way. And maybe I'll come back and have like an object permanence part 2, or more so a non-object permanence, and then there's like a non-object impermanence, I guess. Again, this is different from the initial, like object permanence means the ability to like it's different than that. It's talking now about like actual physical objects and then non-objects that may or may not have a permanence or life outside of the person's death who created it. See you another time.